Hi, PJ Scott here with another segment of Veterans Forum. And once again, we're coming to you from the American Legion in Port Orchard. And for teachers, same deal as last month. Get your VCR ready if you're interested in history and geography, because I have some local World War II veterans with me here today. I have Ernie Schraam. You were in the Navy, right, Ernie?
Right.
And of course, you remember Bob Gardner from last month. Navy, but merchant marine person. So you had a dual role, huh?
Not exactly merchant marine. I was a Navy gun crew
Okay.
on a merchant ship.
Okay, so you heard it from here, where he was, where he was at. Now, last time, I had some friends ask me, well, where was your uncle, PJ? My uncle, Denver Scott, who is my personal family World War II hero, is very much alive and well. Thank you for your inquiries. And I did not mention my father as necessarily a Marine during the program, because he was a Marine during the Korean War, not World War II. So that's why I didn't make a fuss about my dad at that point. I did have an uncle, though, who fought with Patton. His name is Ernest Dotson in Winchester, Virginia. And I brought with me today, and this is kind of getting off the subject a little bit, a picture of my children's great uncle on their father's side. When my mother-in-law passed away, my ex-husband brought home all these pictures. Nothing is written on it. Absolutely nothing. So for those of you, really for the sake of your children and your grandchildren, write names and dates. All I know is that his name is Richard Ziegler. This is World War II. What ship, why he's getting an accommodation, I'm absolutely clueless. So I would encourage you to write on the back of pictures. Now today, Ernie, since you weren't a guest with us last month, we want to get you up to speed. And my first question, if you recall, was where were you when Pearl Harbor happened, and what were your thoughts?
On December 7th, 1941, I was working on my car in the backyard with the radio on. And while I was listening to the radio, I heard this strange announcement coming over the radio saying that Pearl Harbor was bombed. Now, Pearl Harbor, I didn't even know where that was at. I was 16 years old. I was a junior in high school in Kent, Washington. That's over in the valley near Renton and Seattle.
Right.
And then my thoughts were, I can't believe it, because I was going to school with about a fourth of my class was Japanese students.
Oh, that must have made it very awkward indeed.
It did make it very awkward indeed
yeah,
to
I would
go
imagine.
to school. And we were with them from December 7th until about February. That's when they took them and put them in the internment camps to get them out of harm's way, and also to get them off the coast. And in the event of a landing on the West Coast, they would be in a safe place.
Well, I think, you know, we didn't bring this up last time, Bob. Yes, we were, in a sense, protecting them as well.
Yes,
you said get
definitely.
them out of harm's way. I don't think that we necessarily brought that up in the last segment. Yeah. Well, that must have been really odd.
It was strange, and these young people, we didn't, you don't know who was the enemy and who was a friend, because they had a Saturday school to keep up with their culture. The Japanese students went to school on Saturday. So, and there were spies. There was people that had radios and sending receiving sets and and lights in the chimney.
Now let's make it clear: the vast majority of American Japanese were loyal to this country. The vast majority. So I don't want anybody leaving this show thinking we're implying otherwise, but there can always be one or two that can do extreme damage.
Yes,
and that's true in any war conflict.
Nobody goes to war with somebody else without having planned it extensively, and I'm sure that they had a core group in America at that time.
Well, you know, folks, I belong to the American Legion in Post 68, and one of the fellows mentioned to me who'd seen this program last month that I was talking, we were speaking about justified fears for the people on the West Coast in regard to the Japanese to attack us. I mean, they've sunk so many ships at Pearl Harbor. What was going to stop them? And I failed to mention, I kept talking about California, Oregon, and Washington. They did indeed get into Alaska, which we bought from Russia. In fact, I called the Port Orchard Library and talked to the resource librarians. I want to thank them. We bought that Alaskan territory 30 March of 1867. So everyone knew it belonged to us. Get real. And the Japanese did get on 3 islands. I forget the one, but there was Dutch Harbor and Sitka. Do you gentlemen remember the other one? But they're in the Aleutian chain, and they occupied that area in June 42 until we bumped them out. So yes, there was definitely justified fears about the Japanese invading us.
They actually got on the U.S. territory.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So since you must have got the news immediately. You're there. This sounds like a movie. Roll the camera. You're fixing your car and it's on the radio. Yeah. You heard it as soon as it got out. Did you go in and tell your folks?
Oh, yes. And then, of course, that evening when Mr. Roosevelt come on, and the next day, I forget just exactly what, but when they declared a war, situation of war, that they had been attacked by the Japanese. And of course, then everybody was pretty much aware what was going on.
Now, do you have older brothers, Ernie?
Yes, I do. I had 4 older brothers. And,
4 older brothers?
I was the youngest of 7, and I was the only one that went into the services, which was the Navy.
Oh,
I had an older brother later on went into the Seabees, construction battalion, and he was stationed at Pearl Harbor.
So when did you decide to go in, and what motivated you to go in? Now, let's backtrack. You were 16 when this actually happened. Wasn't that the case with you as well, Bob?
Well, I was 17.
Oh, you were 17.
I'm the old man on the team.
Oh, okay, because I remember thinking my uncle was 16, and as soon as he got 17, he had his parents sign, and he went in. So did you finish high school?
I finished high school in 1943. I joined the Navy on the 15th of June. I graduated from high school on the 10th. And on the 17th, I was 18 years old, and on the 18th, I was on a train going to Farragut, Idaho for boot camp.
You know, people, these guys have heard me say this before, but I mean, I put my hand up in November 71, and I didn't know there was anything Navy in Idaho. Absolutely nothing. And in a space of a couple of months, we got boot camp buddies here that went to. Does anyone have any idea when that boot camp folded? Because it was not in existence by 71, I can tell you that.
No, it folded immediately after the war.
Okay, well, that's why I didn't.
Can't give you a
They
date.
took a bulldozer to it.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But there were 7 camps, and Lake Ponderay is where we did our rowing in the whaleboats.
Okay. Well, Ernie, we stopped at the Marshall Islands, but give us the highlights of your Navy career between boot camp and the Marshall Islands, and then we're going to get on with it. So.
Okay, and upon leaving boot camp, and that was probably in July of 43, I was directed to go to Bremerton to regroup for the USS Midway, which was a Kaiser-built aircraft carrier, small, they call them Jeep carriers.
Well, your folks must have liked that. They got to see you before you took off. Great.
And of course, my first sea duty was on the Bremerton-Seattle Ferry. First time I'd been on a craft any larger than a rowboat. And then we grouped up there, and we bussed down to Tongue Point, down Astoria, Oregon. They had a big installation there where Kaiser would build the ships and bring them down to Astoria to be fitted out at Tongue Point, and then they would go to sea because it's right there on the mouth of the Columbia River.
Right.
Then we went to San Diego, and we ferried some planes to Brisbane, Australia, some P-40s for the Army.
Now, what ultimately ended up being your rate? Because I don't know if they use this term in World War II, but in my day, you would have been called an Airedale.
No, I was a Seaman Force. I was the deck force.
Oh, okay.
See, the air group was
a totally separate division. Okay.
Yeah, it was a separate division that was a group that went on the aircraft carriers.
Now, what was your job on the aircraft carrier?
I was a gunner's mate. I was Seaman First Class.
Okay.
And I was on the 20s, 20 millimeters, 40 millimeters, and 5-inch 38s.
Okay.
And then after we went to Australia, we come back and in Christmas of 1943, I spent in Hawaii, my first Christmas away from home. We celebrated Christmas on the hangar deck, and then we went down to Diamond Head and went swimming and had a picnic in the afternoon.
That must have, for this Washington boy, it must have been a kind of odd Christmas to go swimming, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Then our fast task force grouped up and we went to Saipan, Tinian, and Guam for the invasion there. Because the Japanese had taken the islands over.
And you're still on the Midway.
Yeah, still on the Midway.
Okay.
And we supported the Marines on the beach there. Our air group would strafe and bomb when they hit a pocket of resistance.
Now,
and that was basically what we was designed to do.
Do you feel comfortable talking about any moments? Because I know my uncle was a gunner. He got up to be boatswain's mate second class, and he told me on the telephone 2 months ago when I was interviewing him, when you're in the Navy, you don't have a hill to run over. You don't have another foxhole. You are stuck there. You have got to fight. You have to fight. Better give it 200%. And of course, there were times he said he was thankful that his mother had taken him to Sunday school because he knew who to pray to, and it helped calm him down. Did you have any experiences where you really thought, boy, this is it?
Yeah, I think we pretty much thought that every day because there was always submarines around, and we was on guard continuously.
So I knew that you had other things going on in your career at that point in the war effort. So this is your time here, Bob, to tell us.
I was a gunner, even first class Navy, aboard a merchant marine ship protecting the merchant marine, hopefully.
Right.
And we sailed the South Pacific. We hit the Marshall Islands and the whole gamut down there. And actually, the closest I ever came to being really scared was off the Hawaiian Islands. We were supposed to go into Pearl Harbor the following morning, just what they call GQ at night.
Now, what year are we in here, Bob?
We're back in 1944.
Okay.
And it was just getting dark at night. We're standing general quarters on our decks at our gun stations, and they got a radio message of a so-called enemy sub position.
A what kind of sub position?
Enemies sub.
Oh, enemy. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was just getting dark enough you couldn't see a hand in front of your face, and they determined that if it had gone 10 more minutes, we'd have been on top of the sub. So what the captain did, and this is the captain in the Merchant Marine, turned his ship and headed due south and poured the coals to it as fast as they could go. And as soon as we did our turns, we saw flares go up.
And is the crew totally aware of all this?
Oh, yeah.
Well, then you all were sweating it, weren't you? Yeah.
And we were at general quarters. And we stood general quarters all night. We missed the Hawaiian Island group by 90 miles south the following morning.
Well, those Japanese subs, frankly, were terrifying people. I think I may have mentioned last week, my uncle was on the Saratoga, an aircraft carrier, and it got it. In fact, I believe, aren't those poor guys that didn't make it, in fact, buried at the Bremerton Cemetery? What is that, Ivy Green? There was, I don't know, I'm going to say 28, but I'm not real certain. Don't take my word for it. That was killed by a Japanese torpedo.
Now, this particular time we were sailing, but we didn't have any escorts. We were all by ourselves. So it's no wonder we turned tail and ran.
Well, yeah, if you don't have anybody to help you out, yes, you're in difficult
we
straits.
We that whole chain and kept on going. And you talk about a bunch of wet behind the ears scared sailors. We were just kind of scared.
I bet. Now, Ernie, getting back to you, you were on an aircraft carrier, the Midway. Did you ever witness, I'm sure this had to happen for the sake of younger viewers, giving them an education, that obviously a lot of your airplanes did not come back?
Absolutely, yeah. They were shot down over the enemy territory, some of them. Some of them landed in the water. They come back with holes in them.
Were you able to pick some up that maybe had run out of gas?
Well, other ships pick them up sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, the destroyers, that's what the destroyers basically did, was pick up the pilots and bring them back, and then we'd rig a breacher buoys between the destroyer and the aircraft carrier and bring them across that way.
I assume during World War II, listening to my uncles, that there wasn't this job division that there has been existing for many years. If there was a fire on deck, were you expected to do your part to get the fire under control on deck, or was that just something the firemen did?
Everybody had a general quarter station, and then we knew what the other people's job was, so in case somebody's hurt or something like that, they could fold in. But
Well,
basically, the firemen did their job, and the gunner's mate and the machinist and all that, they basically stood their
Well,
watches.
it certainly would pay to know all the jobs, because you can't count. This is war, people. This is war. You're
Yeah.
the buddy right next to you could be
Yeah,
shot and
you
killed, and,
mentioned it, help.
you'd better
Yeah,
do his
yeah.
know how to do his job.
Yeah, we all knew what each other was supposed to be doing.
What battle was the Midway severely damaged?
Okay, when MacArthur's and the task force went for his landing on Leyte Gulf in the Philippines in October 1944, we were the support forces for his ground forces. Like I mentioned before, there we would bomb and strafe the Japanese
Right.
positions that were giving them resistance for the Army. That's basically what our job was. And
And I'm sure the ground troops, the Army men and the Marine that are tackling this really appreciated the airplanes
Oh, yeah,
coming
that
off
was-
your ship, or we would have lost a lot more Army and Marine
sure,
folks for
sure.
sure. So those ships did play a vital part in keeping those men alive.
yeah, right.
Okay, go ahead.
And then on the 25th of October in the morning, our task force, Halsey's task force, was lured away by a fake message. And
Okay.
in the morning, on the 25th, this is part of the ship's log. I'll just read it through here as it
Sure.
goes. On October 25th, 1944, at about 06:50 a.m., units of the Japanese fleet were spotted by Ensign Brooks. He was a pilot off of the St. Lo. The fleet consisted of 4 battleships, 6 cruisers, and 12 destroyers. Among them was the Yamata, which was the biggest battleship in the world. It had 18-inch guns, and they were...
We're talking about the Japanese here, kids. The
This is
the
Japanese
Yamata
fleet.
is a Japanese. Yeah,
Okay. With Halsey's force gone, our force consisted of 6 small jeep carriers and 7 destroyers. We had 13 ships in our force. And when they came through between the islands, behind MacArthur, they went to blow up his position. They seen us, figuring we were Halsey, I assume, and they just started blowing us apart. Okay, then at 6:53, anti-aircraft firing began. At 8:06:58, the first salvos were seen exploding around the ships of our task force, Taffy 3. The splashes of exploding shells were dye-marked, red, blue, and yellow, and so forth. At 07:03, our destroyers started laying smokescreen, and salvos were exploding everywhere around the ships. At 07:07 to 07:30, Japanese task force continued to close to 14,000 yards, firing continuously. At 07:30, the 5-inch guns from our aircraft carriers began firing because they come into range. The Japanese fleet and our aircraft began to bomb and strafe and torpedo their fleet. And at 07:56, Japanese torpedoes launched from their destroyers could be seen heading for our ships.
Was this a pretty evenly matched battle here? I mean,
Not at all.
it sounds like you were pretty overpowered and fighting for your life.
Yeah, they had 22 ships, and we had 13 to begin with.
Okay.
At 0800 to 0815, their ships closed to 10,000 yards, with salvos continuing to hit the water near our stern. At 0816 to 910, during this period, the Taffy 3 was under continuous fire. At about 8:20, the sister ship Gambier was heavily hit and lost one of the engines and sunk at 9:11 by gunfire. Then they closed to 6,900 yards and fired the final salvos and torpedoes and retired from their fleet westward, and from our task force at about 9:10. At 9:24, Lieutenant Waldrop, a pilot from the St. Lo, saw many torpedoes approaching our task force. He strafed one and exploded it, and seeing another, he also strafed and exploded it. Now these were headed towards our ships. He was a fighter pilot from our ship. At 09:43, all units of the Japanese fleet ceased firing and were retiring northward. At 10:10, we secured from general quarters to set the watch and went below for breakfast. At 10:51,
Now, let
Ernie...
me just hold on. If you're going to breakfast, do we assume there's a lull in the battle at
Yes,
this point?
definitely.
Okay.
We thought it was pretty safe when the Japanese fleet left in turn.
Uh-huh.
And in 10:51, aircraft fire was seen and heard. General quarters was again set. At 10:53, the enemy plane, a Japanese plane, Zeke 52, with a bomb under each wing, dove into the flight deck of the St. Lo.
Is this what they would call the
Okay, now,
kamikazes?
see, the name
Yeah.
was changed during this week to St. Lo from Midway.
Uh-huh.
So that's why it's called St. Lo. Just forward of the after elevator. Estimated chronological sequence of explosions is as follows. At 10:53, a Japanese plane hit the flight deck, exploding. At 10:54, medium explosion. At 10:55, heavy explosion blew part of the flight deck out. At 10:59, medium explosion folded forward elevator back. At 11:05, very heavy explosions blew out part of the port side. At 11:07, very heavy explosions blew out the starboard side. At 11:14, very heavy explosions. And at 11:20, another very heavy explosion. At 11:25, the ship sank.
Well, as I say, every time you say the word explosion, I'm thinking about the tremendous loss of life that had to incur.
Yeah, there was
during those.
126 on our ship that was lost that morning.
Mm-hmm.
At 1100 hours, Captain McKenna decided the ship could not be saved and sounded abandoned ship. Ships of the Taffy 3 picked up survivors. 126 crewmen and pilots were killed that morning. Now this is when the ship final explosion. Those parts and pieces were going up, I figure, 800 feet in the air. And this is an artist's conception. And I went down just about where those fellows are coming down the ropes there. I went off the forward end of the ship. And I was in the water for probably, I imagine 2 hours at the most. All of us were picked up within about 2 hours.
Is it fair to say, you might not have admitted this when this was happening, but you had to have been concerned about your life?
Oh, absolutely. And that's when our
yeah.
Lord Jesus became very, very near to my life.
Well, and I'm sure my Uncle Denver, I'm sure if he was here, would say that his mother did a lot of praying on his behalf. And I'm sure your mother did as well.
We had a lot of religion about that time.
Yeah. What's that saying? There's no atheists and foxholes.
No.
Now, well, where were you at, Bob, and what were you doing while he's...
While he's getting sunk?
Yeah, while he's getting sunk, yeah.
Well, I might have been in Fort Harbor, or I could have been over in Espiritu Santos.
Uh-huh.
But he was talking about a 5-inch gun, and this is a picture of a 5-inch gun on a merchant marine ship with no armament around it. It really kind of exposed there.
Yeah.
This was a 5-inch 38 gun, which is a dual-purpose gun, anti-aircraft gun and surface craft gun. And it was the sweetheart. This is the one that really surprised the Japanese Navy because of its efficiency and its ability to shoot. With the 2-piece ammunition, and the shell went in and the cartridge went in behind it and breech closed, and you shot the darn thing.
Well, we're quickly running out of time, so now my question is going to be to both you gentlemen is, where were you when you heard the war had ended? Because we're running out of time. This has been a quick half hour here. So very quickly, where were you when the war ended?
I was in Okinawa
Oh, okay.
and Buckner Bay, and we had an air raid that night too.
Oh, so it didn't seem like it was really over for you
Well,
then.
they announced the war was over, and we all, boy, we're going to get to see the movie on deck. So we went up there, and we didn't stay up there long because the destroyers were going around with their smoke bombs, and we had the air raid. We secured that.
And you, Ernie, where were you when the war was declared?
After my survivors leave, I went aboard the USS Sumner. It was a destroyer, and I went back out again to Pearl, and the first atom bomb was dropped. And then they sent us to Tokyo Bay, and en route the second one's dropped. And we operated about 6 weeks right at the entrance to keep ships from going in and out. And then we went in with the Missouri during the signing. And then we come back to the States.
Oh, okay. You know, my uncle was on the USS Pennsylvania, which was a capital battleship. And he had heard rumors that that was going to be the ship where the peace signing would take place, but it got hit pretty much at the end of the war, so that scrapped that idea. But he too, I guess the ship, the Pennsylvania had sort of a lottery, and he was one of the fortunate winners, and he was on the Missouri and saw the peace signing. So you and my uncle may have crossed each other.
Could be.
But in the same company anyhow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, folks, there is obviously an awful lot to World War II that we just couldn't touch on and didn't have the time. But I can tell you this, if you're interested in World War II, frequently you'll see programs, very interesting programs on the History Channel, sometimes the Discovery Channel or the Learning Channel. I want to thank Ernie for being a guest today, and I want to thank the commander again. And quickly tell us, when does the American Legion here in Port Orchard meet? I know it's Wednesday evenings. What
Well,
Wednesday?
We meet on the first and third Wednesday of the month
Okay,
at 7:30.
okay.
That's almost religious, with the exception of the month of July. We don't meet.
Okay, well, I always like to encourage veterans to join some kind of veterans service organization. And we veterans have served our country so we can have the freedom to have the kind of lifestyle we choose. And at this particular post and the one in Paulsbo, if having alcohol is an issue for you, go to those posts because it doesn't happen. And as usual, I'd like to end the program. People, we're in dangerous times now, Iraq, Korea, and I always ask you to pray for our active duty military personnel, but I'd like to add that you pray for our leaders, that they make really wise choices, because this could impact all of us and our nation. This is PJ Scott, and I hope you'll come back next month. I will be interviewing a gal in regard to health benefits for veterans, so you need to take advantage of those health benefits. See you next time.